Hello and welcome to Outdoors Nat. In this video we're going to be running through the different types of tent and how to choose the right one for you. So we've got three different types: a tunnel, a mid and freestanding over here. So we'll run through their features and why you choose a different one based on what your activity you're doing. So let's run through some tent setups. We've got three different types here. I'll set them up and then we'll run through some of their features.
So why would you get a tunnel tent? Well, the advantages of a tunnel tent are that it has really good space to weight ratio for the number of poles it needs, because the poles are just providing a structure at either end, and then all the middle section is held up by the tension between those two poles. And so it also provides a really good wind and snow/rain shape to keep the water shedding off either side efficiently.
Alright, so here we have a Wilderness Equipment second arrow. It's a tunnel tent, so we've got two hoops and then we have to have a peg out this side and our pegs out this side to extend it and put it up, and you saw that in a little time lapse. Then we've got additional guy lines for support on either side, and this tent works on a kind of flex system, so it should be able to flex around, and it's got bungee cords in all of the attachments for the guy lines.
So why would you buy a mid tent? Mid tents have really good versatility between how you use the space inside of the tent. And so here I have an inner and an outer, but you could do either one. You could do the outer, or you could just do the inner, or you could do a half inner and have a big vestibule space as well. The other great thing is it uses often a walking pole setup, which you might be carrying with you anyway. So that's a great way to save weight as part of the system. The next thing is that you do need to peg it out to hold the structure up, and then downside is that you end up with this big pole in the middle, but you have a really good space inside, and it gets really high towards the center of the tent, but that means the people on the outside, or the space on the outside, can be quite low and up against the roof. Another downside is you've got to mount the pole pushing up to the inside, and that can be a point of weakness up the top here for stretch and durability of these tents. Freestanding or dome tents use the tension of crossing over poles to hold up the tent shape. And so here you can see I'm putting poles across. Diagonally, this one has 3 poles, but they can have 2. And that provides the structure for the inside of the tent. And then I can pick up the tent and move it around without it collapsing on me. And then we often have to pin out the vestibules using pegs.
So let's start on the tunnel, and a tunnel tent is 2 hoops that are then pulled tight by pegs at either end, and without the pegs the tent will collapse, so you have to have somewhere to attach the ends of the tent to get it to have its shape. And so that's its main downfall, as well as being a good advantage because it makes it nice and slim, and it also reduces the amount of poles that you need in this type of tent. Tunnel tents all have those features, being hooped and then having to have the pegs at either end to pull them nice and tight. Then we have our mid setup. So here a mid has a central pole on the inside, and then we peg around the outside to give our classic pyramid shape, which is where they get their mid name from. And they are really space efficient in terms of pole to size. Then they have some downfalls in that, again, you have to have the pegs to get the tent set up. The final tent here we have is a freestanding tent, and so that doesn't need pegs to make it stand up, and I can show you a little clip of that. But then it also needs pegs to pin down the vestibules generally to get that extra space. So it doesn't need pegs to get it standing up essentially, but then our other 2 types do. So that's its main advantage over here. But as a result of that, you have to have more poles to allow the tent to stand up, so then you're adding weight of poles over what you'd get with the other 2 tent types.
Waterproofing ratings work by measuring the amount of water it can hold above the tent fabric in a vertical sense before it starts leaking through. So a 1500 millimeter waterproof rating means that there's 1.5 meters or 1500 millimeters of water sitting on top of that tent before it starts leaking through. So that will determine the waterproofness of the tent in different conditions. And so here I actually only use the single layer on the bottom, but there is a ground sheet of this which can be used to increase the waterproofing of the floor on this tent. Another way manufacturers increase the waterproof rating of the tent is by putting a thicker coating on the fabric, And this is needed because the downwards pressure when you're laying on the floor of the tent will increase the penetration or water volume that can come through due to the increased pressure.
The next thing to look at for your tents is the amount of seasons that it will withstand. So our yellow one here, this tunnel tent, is designed for 5 seasons, so it's really wind efficient due to its shape, and it can also withstand snow loading as well. Our mid, again, quite a wind efficient shape, so it can be 4 or 5 seasons depending on the model that you get, and it's got nice steep sides, so again does snow loading there, so that's really good. Then we have our red tent here, and this freestanding tent is going to be good for 3 seasons, and that's because it's not designed for snow loading, and that's because on top we can see we have quite a flat spot there, so it's not going to cope with extra weight on the tops of that tent setup. Not all freestanding tents are not 5 seasons. You can get them with 5 seasons, just this one particularly is not set up for that, so you can get them all like that. Different tent setups will have different amounts of mesh on the inside, so this one's got a full mesh inner and just the bathtub floor to keep the water out, so that's going to be a lot colder than my tent just here, which has a full solid inner as well as a solid outer. Here when we look at this tent, we've got a full inner that is not mesh, so that's going to add a lot of extra warmth, but then we also have mesh options for the doors on this one.
Next, we're going to look at the usable internal space of these tents. So we're going to start with the tunnel, and a tunnel tends to have quite a rectangular shape, so it's got a low width to a long length, and this means you're sleeping side by side with your co-partner, and you have a vestibule at the end. The next one is the mid, and that has a low sides and a tall center, and you have a pole in the middle that you've got to navigate as well as part of the structure, so it can be a little difficult to fit everyone in, but the usable space is quite good, and vestibule space is hard to create because the outside of the tent is pinned down close to the edge. The next one is a freestanding, and so the freestanding space is all created by that pole tension across, and so you get a usable space as big as the pole length that you have, and then the vestibules tend to extend that space by pegging it out, and they tend to be a rectangle or square shape as part of that setup.
So thanks for watching Outdoors and Nat. I hope you enjoyed this review of what type of tent you get and the different features of these different tents. Check out my other videos and specific reviews on these tents as well. Have a great outdoor adventure.